Welcome to the New Earth Visioning Project. Tonight's presentation is about how to move beyond deep-seated trauma. For those of you who may be new to our group, I'm Mary Histing, and because our facilitator, Janice Coyle, is on retreat, I'll be leading the meeting, as well as giving the presentation. So just a very brief introduction about me and this New Earth Visioning project. Less than almost a year ago now, I think it was, Janice had the inspiration to start this group. And I was very excited because I really have been thinking, talking about the New Earth is all I want to do anymore, and creating it. So a little bit about me. My profession, I'm a massage therapist and a craniosacral therapist, body work and energy work practitioner. I have an office in Herndon, Virginia, where I've been practicing on my own for 3 years, but I've been in the career about 11 years. And that's me in a nutshell. I could talk all night about me, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So let's, with no further ado, let's begin the presentation. Moving beyond deep-seated trauma on our ascension path. I thought I'd begin with just a little disclaimer and let everybody know that I am not a psychotherapist, nor do I hold any degrees in psychology, but what I am is a human. I've been a human for about 51 years now, and I've been working on healing my own trauma for at least 32 of those years. My professional work is in the healing arts, as I mentioned, body work and energy work. And these past 10 years, I've taken advanced studies in craniosacral therapy and somato-emotional release. All of this is just to say that I have worked with enough people to know that we are not alone in experiencing trauma. It is intrinsic to the human experience. And how I got into this work is that after I completed massage school, I had one burning question. How do I address the emotional part of physical stress? So this topic is actually my favorite thing to talk about, and I feel like this is the topic I speak with my clients about on a regular basis. And it's important to note that not only are we talking about trauma, but the beautiful thing about trauma is if we can become aware of it and learn how to resolve it and to continue working on resolving it, on the other side of trauma is freedom. And that's really my motivation for sharing this tonight, freedom. Okay, let's start with some definitions. Trauma is a psychological, emotional response to an event or an experience that is deeply distressing or disturbing. And stress is a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. And you could say that trauma and stress are obviously closely related. Trauma is the cause of stress, and stress is actually the cause of trauma. So these two cannot be separated. Now, trauma and the chronic stress resulting from trauma is much more of a widespread human experience than most people understand, largely due to the misunderstanding of the forms in which traumas can be manifested. When people think of trauma, sometimes they might think only of sexual or physical abuse, or the more severe forms of trauma. But actually, trauma can be manifest in much more subtle forms. And the truth is, it touches everyone's life. If you're human, you've got trauma. So I've broken it into two categories: childhood trauma and lifehood experiences, trauma from life experiences. So childhood trauma is experiences that we have had from the age of about 8 months of gestation until age 8, may have imprinted trauma into our body and or our psyche. Gabor Mate says in his book, When the Body Says No, what matters are the child's unconscious perceptions based on his innermost interpretations of his interactions with the world. Those interpretations, embedded at the cellular level, constitute the biology of belief that governs so much of what we feel, what we do, and how we react to events. I think that's a very powerful quote, especially if we know about the biology of belief. It actually affects our cellular structure and our DNA. It's a big deal. It's important to note here that many times we as children didn't understand why something was happening to us or happening in the family. And we thought it was our fault. We just did. That's just how it is. We didn't, it wasn't our fault, obviously, but that's how we interpreted it. And this subconscious belief can actually set us up for taking the blame when bad things happen in our adulthood as well. And a word about trauma from life experiences. Now, this trauma might be easier to spot. Loss of a job, a huge life change, loss of a loved one, etc. These are everywhere. Trauma from life experiences can take up residence in our cells if the trauma wasn't dealt with properly. Unhealed trauma is pervasive inside all of humans. And something I started to understand deeper as I prepared this presentation is that childhood trauma, because we were in a developmental stage of growth, actually it formed neural pathways in our brain. And life trauma from experiences as an adult many times just took up residence right on top of those neural pathways because they were already there. So it's almost like we have a propensity to be re-traumatized from childhood trauma. So that's something that just hit me like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So most of us have not been trained to heal trauma. And of course, in our North American culture, we haven't been made aware that this was a thing until people like Dr. Gabor Mate and Peter Levine started writing and speaking about it. And of course, shamans since the beginning of time knew trauma needed to be dealt with, but they haven't necessarily been taken seriously in the modern era up to this point. Unless you're one of the rare few who has gone to South America and done an ayahuasca ceremony, then you would know. All right, let's see. So it's important to note that trauma is energy because emotions are energy. The energy of trauma comes from the shock of whatever occurred. Many times we go into fight, flight, or freeze mode and disassociate from our bodies. Energy is designed to pass through, but if we haven't been taught about this, we feel the energy of trauma and the energy of emotions, and we clamp down or disassociate. We freak out. We can't help it. Our body and mind feels the trauma, and it feels as if it's actually happening in real time. Think about those neural pathways again. It's uncomfortable, and we haven't been taught how to deal with it. We've actually been taught the opposite. How many times have people been celebrated in our culture for being brave and not showing or dealing with emotion? Think about pro athletes or you know, just public figures. It's always celebrated that, you know, oh, even though they've had a great emotional trauma, they're able to carry on. And these slogans that are flying around our cultural soup: keep calm and carry on, man up, keep a stiff upper lip. I always think about my older brother when I was growing up. He would always tell me, be a man, be a man. And remember hanging on to that slogan and then realizing, wait a minute, I'm not a man. So a little more about energy. It's meant to move, and it will remain stuck unless it is felt, acknowledged, and allowed to move and release. So the bottom line of all this is, why is stuck trauma such a big deal? Because the more trauma we're carrying around in our tissues, the more weighed down we are. Essentially, we're not able to live the fullest expression of what we came here to be. And furthermore, unhealed trauma in the body can eventually, over time, manifest as illness or dysfunction in physical, mental, or emotional manifestations. So let's talk about how stuck trauma affects our emotional responses. Have you ever heard yourself lash out in anger and then afterwards thought, why did I react that way? Unconscious responses come from unhealed trauma. I have a few examples. A friend of mine observed that her 7-year-old daughter was saying frequently, I'm mad at myself. And I was wondering, how could a young child develop such loathing at a young age? There has to be more to the picture. This 7-year-old child's father is dealing with a cancer diagnosis, and she's the youngest one in the family. The older sibling throws stuff when she's angry, but this youngest one is gentle and mild-tempered. She doesn't want to hurt others with her anger, so she turns it inward and is angry with herself. I feel like this is a really good example of how trauma just gets cemented, turned inward. Another example, I once traveled with a friend who I observed when she was asked to check her carry-on luggage at the gate, or right at the, when she was about to enter the airplane, they said, no, there's no room, give us your luggage. She got very agitated, more and more agitated, and it started to become like a little incident. And I remember looking at her and thinking, wow, where is that coming from? And later she shared with me that she had experienced a significant amount of trauma involved being locked in confined spaces when she was a child. And that idea of flying and not being able to control her personal space definitely just fed right into those trauma responses that were in her tissues. Let's look at how stuck trauma affects us mentally. Depression is one of the manifestations of unhealed trauma. It's actually unexpressed rage turned inward, kind of like that 7-year-old. Raise your hand if you know someone who's depressed. This affects almost everyone on the planet, unfortunately. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You're like, oh my gosh, wow, people have trauma. So limiting beliefs that railroad our decisions and life path are also a side effect of trauma. And this is a very subtle one, but it's very big and important. Constant negative thought patterns to the tune of, I don't deserve to be happy, I don't deserve to be loved, I don't deserve good things, etc. Raise your hand if you've had any of these types of recordings playing in your head, right? This one's a lot more pervasive and very unconscious. How stuck trauma affects us physically. Did you know that many autoimmune diseases stem from unhealed trauma? Check out When the Body Says No by Dr. Gabor Mate, or The Body Keeps the Score by Vessel van der Kolk, or anything by Peter Levine. There's other authors, but those three really nail it for me. And of course, over the years, I've seen many clients who can't figure out why they have pain in a particular area of their body. And they go to doctors and it yields no answers, and they end up in my office. I could give you so many examples, but I will give you a few. The first example is a middle-aged woman who was a nurse by profession. She had debilitating migraines, so much so that she's on disability from work. She's been to neurologists and had CT scans and tried all the migraine medications, and nothing has helped her. Finally, she found me and discovered craniosacral therapy. After her first visit, the pain and the auras improved, and as we continued working together, she later revealed to me that she had been sexually abused as a young person. These migraines typically come on for her when she's overly stressed. And of course, she went into a very helping, service-oriented career, and in her family, she's the one who jumps when somebody needs help. And so she's frequently stressed and frequently has migraines. Here's another story. A client of mine has an unexplained tremor in his left hand and arm. He said it developed after he decided to sell the business he'd spent most of his life building. The people who bought the business decided to keep him on and then proceeded to change everything he spent his life building. And this gentleman, he said, yeah, it's pretty obvious where this came from, but how do I resolve it? So that's the journey he's on now. Recently, a client I hadn't seen in a year came into my office. She had a crutch to help her walk, and she told me she had a lot of knee pain, but she hadn't fallen or injured it. As we continued talking, she revealed that she'd been on vacation at the beach with her dog, and her dog became sick and died. She broke down in my office and she said he had been her companion through the craziness of the past 2 years, and now she feels so utterly alone. Let's talk about destructive and unhelpful patterns of behavior and addictions, and why these are associated with trauma. I think this is something that it's maybe not everybody sees the pattern, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. So anything can become an addiction if we do it to distract or numb ourselves. Food, alcohol, vaping, video games, sex. I actually know someone who's addicted to getting her hair done. We all have our thing. That's what addictions are pretty pervasive as well. These have developed because, as we said before, we've never been taught to feel or recognize a trauma response. and therefore we disassociate from what we feel, aka the body. We get into this space of it's not safe in the body, and we feel panic. We don't want to feel what we're feeling, and we want to control the situation. So out of the body, into the addiction. Numbing the feelings gives us an illusion of control, and we go into doing mode to distract us from feeling the pain or discomfort. And it's legitimate pain, so there's no judgment there. I know I myself, when I'm feeling emotions, and sometimes they're unconscious and I'm not aware of them, but I'll notice my actions. I start spinning and running and doing, and I get myself just completely in a tizzy. And then eventually, after some time goes by, I realize, wait a minute, what am I doing? And wait, the question isn't, what am I feeling? That's the real question. What am I trying not to feel? So now that we've talked about how trauma can manifest itself and try to wreak havoc in our lives, let's talk about the hopeful parts. There are actually lots and lots of methods that exist to help release and resolve trauma. And I'm here to tell you folks, there's hope. There's a lot of hope, which is why we're here tonight, to encourage each other. So the thing about these methods and techniques, there's so many, but there's no one like you. No one has your exact story, your exact formula for your life and how you got to this point. So nobody can tell you what is going to work for you. You have to try different things and find one or the combination that work best for you. So now the journey begins. So let's start with just some of the ones that have helped me in the past. But like I said, there's so many. EFT or tapping. This one is the emotional freedom technique. It's pretty well known. It's a powerful stress relief technique. It's used on the combined principles of ancient Chinese acupressure and modern psychology. So this gentle tapping technique resolves negative feelings, thoughts, emotions, cravings, and emotional and physical pain. It really resolves a lot. It's sometimes referred to as emotional acupuncture because by tapping on specific acupuncture points on the body, the energy pattern behind a problem can be released. And EFT tapping, it's not relevant how long ago something happened or how big or how small the problem is in your life. With the correct EFT protocol, the troubling aspects in your life can permanently disappear, which is pretty awesome. And it's very simple, and it can be practiced by yourself or with the help of a practitioner. And don't worry, at the end of the talk, I have all kinds of resources, and we've got websites and books, and you won't be high and dry. We've got resources for you. The next technique I want to talk about is one of my favorites, inner child or shadow work. The general idea of inner child work is that if you make an effort to contact, listen to, communicate with, and nurture your inner child, you can find and heal the roots of your issues as an adult. Inner child work might take the form of dialoguing or talking with your inner child, journaling from your inner child's voice, using your imagination to go back to yourself at a younger age and reassure that version of you. This technique is one that I've used many, many times in my life, and it has really helped me shift some patterns in my life. Okay, HEARTMATH techniques. This one is another one that's a favorite. It's a very simple breathing techniques that are specifically designed to sync up the mind and the heart and to achieve a better heart rate variability, otherwise known as heart coherence. These techniques calm the nervous system, and they allow us to proceed from a more grounded space. Learning these techniques can be just a little tool that you use if you feel that you need to, make a decision or center and ground yourself before you do something that needs all of your attention and focus. This can kind of line you up and get you synced up and help you proceed in that direction. Okay, the emotion code. This is one I'd forgotten about until we discovered an interview with this Dr. Bradley Nelson the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a great one. It's a simple technique designed by Dr. Bradley Nelson, he's a chiropractor, to muscle test for and clear emotions stored in the body. This technique actually helps release generational trauma. I mean, how awesome is that? Also childhood trauma and even emotional energy from past lives. Very powerful stuff. And the beauty of it is that it specifically targets emotions in the subconscious. And this technique also can be done by oneself or with a practitioner. There's an awful lot out there, folks. We're only halfway through. Okay, this one we all know about, traditional psychotherapy. It would be remiss of me not to mention traditional psychotherapy. God bless the therapists, they're amazing. And this continues to be a valuable resource. And modern day mental health therapists have access to much more trauma-informed training than ever before, which is good news because they can really support us if we're ready to do that trauma healing work. Being accompanied by a mental health therapist can definitely support us as we practice other at-home techniques to resolve trauma. And this has been a great support for me over the years. I've even worked with a therapist this year when some trauma popped up that I thought, gee, I thought I'd resolve this. Nope, here's another layer. So that's the wonderful thing about trauma. It's always another layer ready to help us heal something else. Okay, and of course, this is my wheelhouse. Just to mention that there are types of body work that access the emotional energy from trauma stored in the body, specifically what I practice, which is craniosacral therapy and somato-emotional release. They're an extremely gentle form of touch therapy that accesses the really deep layers of connective tissue in the body where the emotional energy is stored. It's very common that people actually release tears during a session or experience a previously unknown memory from much earlier in their lives. I'll just share a few stories of people who've experienced deep emotional healing during this therapy that I've experienced. And the first one is me. I'll be the first example. Just a tiny backstory about my personal trauma experience has to do with my mother. That's kind of a big one. She went into rehab when I was 3 years old, and we never really had a connection our whole lives. But during a prenatal class that I was taking, we actually did a practice where we accessed the memories of what it was like to be in utero at the actual navel. The therapist put her hand on my belly button and said, you know, let's access those memories through the cells in your navel. So we went back through generations in my family, and she asked me, what was your grandmother feeling when she was carrying your mother in her womb? And I knew the answer because she had asked my body. My body remembered the answer. And then she asked the same question, what was I feeling when I was inside my mother's womb? And I knew the answer because those cells remember, they know. And the answer was, I wanted to have a connection with my mother. That's all I wanted. And then she asked me, what was my mother feeling when she was carrying me? And all of a sudden, like a bolt of lightning, it hit me. And I knew that my mother wanted the same thing that I wanted. She wanted to have a connection with me as well. And that it sent me into hours of tears and just releasing that emotion from my body. All that trauma released and released and released. And it literally shifted my relationship with my mother. It was the most powerful thing that's probably ever happened in my life. So this is deep work that we do here. I'll tell another story about a client who she had heard about somato-emotional release, and she came to me and said, I think I want to do this around a memory I have. And I said, okay, sure. So I asked her where she felt the issue in her body, and she told me it was kind of like a lower abdominal area. So I placed my hand on that area, and I asked her to look, and with her imagination, what's under my hand? So she visualized a brick wall, a solid red brick wall. And I said, okay, tell me about the brick wall. We used a technique called dialogue and imagery. So we talked about the brick wall, and I had my hand on her body, and I felt the tissue moving and changing during her session. And a few minutes later, I asked her, how's that brick wall doing? And she's like, oh, it's actually turned into a few boulders. I said, okay, tell me about the boulders. How big are they? How long have they been there? What do they feel like? And then a few minutes later, I checked in with her. Tell me what's going on over there. And she said, actually, there's like just these little pebbles, and there's a stream running, and the stream is running now, and these little pebbles are getting washed away. So after that session, she revealed to me that this was related to a date rape experience in her college years, and that trauma, the physical part, was able to most of it release during the session. It was really powerful for her. And then the last story about a gal who never really connected to what it was that was releasing, but she came in for a rigging in her ears and put her on the table and we were going to work on her cranial nerves to see maybe we could help tune down that ringing. And all these tears started coming out of her eyes quietly. And I said, what's going on? And she said, I don't know. There's just tears. I said, that's okay. You know, it's your body releasing emotion. So that is something that can happen during these therapies. And there are other therapies that work with the body and emotion. But like I said, this is my wheelhouse. Thought I'd share those stories. Okay, I'm just going to start to wind down with just a few quotes and a word about awareness. As in all things, awareness is the first step. Once you become aware that you're experiencing a trauma response, you can choose what to do next. That is really important. The awareness is where it all begins. And you might not catch yourself the first time, the second time, the third time, maybe the fourth time when you fly off the handle when somebody says something very, you know, nonchalantly to you. You might all of a sudden go, wait a minute, why did I bite that person's head off? So that's awareness. And now the next thing is investigation, okay? So what's going on here? Maybe it's time to do some trauma release work. Awareness is really important. And one of my favorite quotes from Rumi, I'm sure you've heard this a million times as I have, the wound is the place the light enters you. So just a reminder that trauma is actually a gift that keeps on giving because it's the catalyst for our growth. It keeps us going back and healing another layer day after day, year after year, and there's always, always hope. The beautiful thing about this is the trauma is kind of like the layers of muck that got layered on top of our beautiful light that shines within us. And we start uncovering layer by layer and we discover, oh my gosh, look at the light that's in there. Oh my gosh, look at this beautiful creature that's in there, the gifts that I have and the talents I have to share with the world. Look at my light. It's so beautiful. And that's what this journey is about, really. So I just want to encourage us that there's always hope. And the discovery of who we really are is the gift that comes from this work. And one last quote. This is from I believe John Holland is a medium. We just found this on a documentary the other day, like Mike and I do when we're watching documentaries. He just said this and it blew me away. You can go through the life as the victim, the student, or the master. And I think that we could use this in relation to trauma. When we first experience our traumas, we're definitely the victim. But as we start to have awareness and start to become curious, then we become the student and we can dig deeper and say, what's going on here? What do we need to learn? And then the next step is the master. We've worked on our trauma for years and years and years. And we finally get to a point where we're above it. We're much more above it than we were buried in it. And we can share our gifts with the world and we can encourage others and say, you can do this too. There's always hope. Okay, so let's look at our resources that I promised to share with you. These will be on our website, so no worries. If you can't write them all down, it's okay. I believe that these slides will be on the website as well, but either way, these resources will be made available to you, so don't worry. But I've got the Emotional Freedom Technique website, Dr. Bradley Nelson's book and his website. Here's a great one. M.M. McAdam is the one who has a YouTube channel called Therapy in a Nutshell. Great little snippets of encouragement, how to deal with anxiety or depression or grief, or just little things that we all have to deal with, but in little snippets that anybody can handle. She also has some courses on Udemy that can be taken on these topics. Really good stuff. Dr. James Gordon, he wrote a book called Transforming Trauma, and he's the founder of the Center of Mind-Body Medicine here in DC, near where I live. So he's a great one, and there's a good book to look at. Here's David Berselli. He's the developer of something called tension, stress, trauma release exercises. And I didn't go into this too much, but this has to do with another like a body mind type therapy to kind of help the body release the trauma. And then Dr. Gabor Mate, who was quickly becoming my hero, author of When the Body Says No. he has this film called The Wisdom of Trauma, which I watched to prepare for this talk, and it was just beautiful, just beautiful. I highly recommend that. Here's the HeartMath Institute, their website. One of the places you could go for traditional online psychotherapy. There's so many, but the one that I've used is called betterhelp.com. So user-friendly. It has you fill out like a little profile, and you can actually check on there if you're looking for somebody who's trauma-informed, you know, who's worked with trauma or family systems or whatever, and they'll match you with somebody, and they'll even adjust the price points to work with your budget. So great. I really recommend that if you're looking for online therapy. And then this lovely author, I discovered her books and I'm a big fan. She had debilitating Lyme disease and literally went all over the world trying to find remedies and therapies, and ended up writing books in the process, How to Heal Yourself When No One Else Can. And now she has like two new ones, How to Heal Yourself from Anxiety and How to Heal Yourself from Depression. It's very, very empowering. So I would definitely recommend checking out her books. Okay. Okay, so we're winding down with the presentation part, and we're going to now go into a meditation. So I'll just give us a second here to kind of switch gears, take a breath, feel your body on the chair. All right. I'm going to lead us in a very brief inner child meditation. And I just want to preface this by saying my intention is that we work with something that we can work with for about 10 minutes, and we choose something that's not too overwhelming. So let's begin. So when you're ready, I'm going to invite everyone to place a hand on your heart. And feel your hand on your heart. Feel its warmth, its weight, and know that you are safe right here and right now. And when you're ready, you can close your eyes. Keep your hand on your heart. That's going to be your anchor to safety and security. So in this next breath, I'm going to invite you to engage with your inner child. Inside of us lives ourselves of every year that we've had on this earth. Age 2, age 4, age 7, age 9, age 10, etc. I'm going to invite each of us to make a connection with our inner child in a loving way, in a gentle way, and always feeling our hand on our heart and knowing that we are safe. And once you start to feel that you've connected with your inner child, ask your inner child to share with you like a mini movie, a moment in your life where you might take the next 5 or 10 minutes and just go back and sit with a younger version of yourself, with curiosity, with compassion, and with an intention for healing. And we want to choose a memory or a moment that is not too overwhelming. We want something that we're able to deal with in a gentle way today, in a brief amount of time. And trust your inner child to show you that moment that is the most perfect one to access today. So allow your inner child to lead you by the hand into that memory, into that moment in your life. You might sit next to your inner child and observe what is taking place. Allow your inner child to share with you how he or she is feeling. Allow your inner child to share with you what he or she needs to say. And as you experience these moments through the eyes of your inner child and feel these feelings, also feel your hand on your heart and know that you are safe. We'll take just a couple more minutes and spend some time with our inner child in this situation. We feel our hand on our heart and know that we are safe. It is time for us to leave this memory and to leave our inner child just for this moment. As we gently begin to leave the scene, we start to feel our body here on the chair where we're sitting. We start to feel our hand on our chest going up and down with our breath. And when we feel ready, we can open our eyes. Now we're going to transition into our journaling time. And for those of you who are here live today, we will wrap up writing after about 10 minutes and then begin our discussion time. And for those of you who are watching the recording, we want to thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed your time with us, and we hope that some of these concepts enrich your life.